2012 was released in 2009, it already starts making mistakes. Now come and see everything wrong with 2012 and in the end you will understand why you wouldn't survive this catastrophe. But first check out an ad from our sponsors.
If you suffer or are afraid of ever developing cancer, I know you keep wondering, what will become of me? Will I be alive tomorrow? Will the pharmaceutical industry be able to create a solution to my problem? One thing I assure you, this industry is not worried at all about you. Think with me, why do you think technology involves, the sciences involved, medicine itself involves? And we still don't have a solution to this old problem. Fortunately, along with my team, we have gathered more than 100 definitive forms to beat cancer, some of them 10,000 times more effective than the conventional way. Do you want access to this list? Then click on the link and come find out. The link will be fixed in the comment.
The film begins in the year 2009 with a scientist named Adrian, arriving at an astrophysics institute in India, being greeted by his colleague, Satnam. They go down in an elevator to the underground and the Indian shows the American that the sun is cooking the Earth's core. We go to 2010 and the President of the United States, Thomas Wilson, arrives at a G8 meeting and asks that only the President stay in the room.
Mr. Makarenko wishes to have his interpreters present.
Your English is more than sufficient.
If the Russian president understood English, he wouldn't have brought a translator, but even so he gets rid of the professional just so he doesn't pass the donkey certificate. And another, it is logical that none of these presidents will solve a situation alone, they will have to share with several people, so why not start with their translators, who have literally been appointed because they are extremely trustworthy polyglots. Then they start preparing for the climate disaster, and the movie finally arrives in 2012. We are introduced to our protagonist, a limo driver named Jackson Curtis. He goes to his ex-wife's house to pick up his children, to go camping. Meanwhile, the daughter of President Thomas Wilson, calls Laura, interrupting her father's meeting with Adrian, to inform him about the murder of the Louvre director. She turns on the television and a report is starting about the death of the unfortunate man, I tell you in perfect timing. And the woman questions her father about the crime, but how does she know that the American government has anything to do with it? And another, the meeting to discuss the end of the world will be postponed because of the woman's whims. The spoiled daughter settings have been successfully updated. Back in Jackson, he and his sons head off into the woods to camp, but they find a fence put up by the government, saying that the area is restricted. No problem, just camp on the other side. They arrive further on, finding burnt trees and the remains of a lake. Nothing to be surprised about, California is on fire all the time, so let's get back before someone from the government arrives. And Jackson takes his young children to see animals in an advanced state of putrefaction. This is how vegans are born. The family is watched by Charlie Frost, a radio talk show host, but then an army squadron shows up to catch the family, leaving two questions in the air. How did they find out that Jackson and his sons broke in, but didn't notice Charlie's entrance? And why did they send a whole squadron? Were they expecting Bin Laden to have broken into the lake? And the military takes Jackson and his sons to the base after all. When someone breaks into the premises that you want to hide, you don't arrest them or throw them out, no, you give them a tour to show them around, otherwise you pass for being rude. Meanwhile, Adrian is instructing a colleague when he is warned of the invasion. Look, the guy besides being the head of the scientists also has to deal with small invaders. Adrian goes to talk to Jackson, who asks annoyed about what is going on. Seriously, if he had just beaten this guy up and thrown him out, they wouldn't have had to put up with this questioning. And Adrian asks if Jackson is the author of the book he is reading called, Goodbye Atlantis. And Jackson answers yes. Incredible. So the chief scientist was one of the 422 people out of 300 million who read the Jackson book. For those who don't know, that's protagonism bringing people together. And another thing, what publisher publishes 422 copies of a book? Did they print until they ran out of sheets of paper and end up with this broken number? Adrian sends the staff away and goes back to his business, but then he receives word from Satnam that the end of the world has begun and they must begin the evacuation. And Adrian makes a face like he evacuated in his pants. During the night, Jackson goes camping with his children. The children go to sleep and our card-carrying animal listens to the radio and tunes into Charlie's station, which talks about conspiracy theories, and guess what, Charlie's station is right in front of Jackson, who conveniently. And the broadcaster still transmits with the door open, acoustic isolation for what? if the objective is to be seen by the protagonist. Charlie explains about the end of the world, and his predictions are more accurate than any other. After all the scientists in the world and their highly sophisticated laboratories are no match for a radio broadcaster who guides himself by the Mayan calendar. Charlie says that everyone who tried to reveal the truth about the end of the world was killed, but what a curiosity, everyone was killed except Charlie, who has a radio show and a blog dedicated to exposing the end of the world. And the radio host says that he received a map to the arks that the governments are building to house the survivors, but that he didn't try to go there. Seriously, if he is exposing the end of the world, why didn't he publish this map in his blog on the internet? I know, at some point this map is going to be a play to take the protagonist further, so moving on. In a supermarket, Jackson's ex-wife, Kate, and her husband Gordon are arguing.
I just feel like there's something pulling us apart.
If this is not the convenience of the script, it can only be God saying it is time for a divorce. Back in Jackson, he goes to a store with his children. Little Lily recognizes her teacher giving an interview on television and thus learns of the incident in the supermarket. How convenient. Far away, a Russian billionaire named Yuri is watching a boxing match and then receives a message that an evacuation has begun. He leaves without talking to anyone, not even his girlfriend Tamara, and one of the fighters, who is his friend, notices Yuri leaving, gets upset and is knocked out, I tell you, in lack of focus. The billionaire arrives at his hotel and makes a call to his driver to pick up his kids, and who is the driver? Who? No, it is Jackson. Look what a surprise. Jackson leaves his children at home and goes to pick up the Russians' children. He takes the boys to the airport, but has a disagreement with one of the boys, who tells the driver that he will die, while they will survive, because they are going to the Ark. Look at that, it seemed like a threat, but the kid is just warning the main character. What a thoughtful kid. Jackson gets in the car, and when he turns on the radio he hears Charles talking about the end of the world, and just in time the earth begins to open up. Jackson runs from the car and goes to a pilot and asks to rent the plane, giving a watch as payment. Seriously, I didn't remember that in 2012 he still bartered. Jackson calls his ex-wife and explains the situation, but the woman doesn't believe him, even though she has been through a near-death experience in less than 24 hours. Luckily, an earthquake happens to bring some sense to her empty head. They leave the house and get into Jackson's car, and the driver starts hitting Gordon's car.
Sorry.
Dude got pissed that Jackson hit his car. Imagine when he finds out the goddamn earthquake swallowed the vehicle. Jackson accelerates, being chased by the earthquake, and no crater opens in front of him, because nature knows that it is the protagonist who is in the vehicle. A car with elderly people blocks Jackson. And of course they don't see all the devastation, and you think it's because they're old, but no, it's because they're really extras. Jackson takes a shortcut. A drainpipe dirty our hero's car, and even with impaired vision, he manages to successfully dodge cars and giant donuts. Escape from cars that are thrown at him. Pass in time under a bridge that falls with a super convenient slope, and my favorite, cross a building that collapses in front of you. They arrive at the landing strip and discover that the pilot has died, but the plane is still intact and has already been fueled. How convenient. And even with all the destruction that the city was going through, the pilot fulfilled his promise to wait for Jackson. He's crazy, what an honorable man. But since the pilot died, there is nothing that can be done.
Gordon, you can fly!
But Gordon responds that he's only had a few classes and doesn't want to take any chances. He's serious, there's always an animal that prefers certain death over the likelihood of dying. Jackson convinces the man and they get on the plane. Gordon puts the plane on the runway and cracks open behind them. My gods, my impression or the earthquake is always giving them an opening to escape. They take off, but Gordon flies close to the ground to say goodbye to people who didn't have access to a plane, but how perverse. And the guy who is a pilot in training goes under a train, because the film is like me and has no sense of the ridiculous. And to make matters worse, being able to go everywhere, he chooses to pass between two buildings that are collapsing. It was just gaining confidence that it was abused. Meanwhile, on a yacht, people are partying, since apparently there isn't a television on this boat to show the chaos the world is in. Gordon lands on a runway, which curiously is close to where Charlie is with his trailer, and this runway has fuel tanks and another plane, but there is no one in place, because as it had a lot of spending on special effects, they ended up cutting some extras. Jackson runs out to get where Charlie is as quickly as possible, taking his daughter with him. In the end, if another crater opens, he can throw the child as an offering to quench Mother Nature. Jackson arrives at Charlie's trailer, only the guy isn't there. But at least, he had left the radio on in his program, and as the protagonist was known to enter his trailer, he informs the listeners where he was. Jackson takes the trailer and drives the bag up the mountain where Charlie is. He asks the radio host about the map and gets a drunken response. Jackson gets back in the vehicle and leaves with his daughter, during a volcanic explosion. A fireball flies and hits them, but don't worry, it only serves for dramatic effect as it does not generate any consequences for the trailer, which even wounded manages to fly over a crater. They arrive on the plane, but Jackson stays behind to find the map. And the animal, instead of taking all the papers to the aircraft and checking there safely, keeps doing it in the trailer and gets caught by a crater. And I just want to see how this idiot is going to get out of this, but I'm going to see nothing. The film already cuts to him up there because there was no way this sedentary man could climb the damn vehicle. And the dome still manages to run faster than the volcanic smoke and make it to the plane. Who knew this freak is part Usain Bolt? Gordon takes off the plane. They fly off, but are caught in volcanic smoke. My gods, the acid and the high temperature flew the plane to explode.
Meanwhile, Adrian and his boss Anheuser find out who the Greys from Kin will be arriving in 7 hours and go to alert the President of the United States that they must leave immediately.
No disrespect, sir. We simply do not have time. Make time.
Arranjar tempo.
Make time how? Trading with volcanic smoke. The President is left alone with Adrian and warns the scientist, who will not go to the shelter, as he will remain to die with his people. You are crazy. My God speaks seriously, you're telling me that a politician is giving up his privilege. The film has now become pure comedy. The President goes on national television to talk about the end of the world, and Americans listen carefully and calmly, and even nature takes a break from its massive destruction. I wish I had that prestige. Back with Jackson's group, they arrive at an airport, and there they are spotted by Tamara, who was Gordon's patient, who is the girlfriend of Jackson's boss Yuri. But what a small world. Jackson asks Yuri to give him a ride in his Boeing, but Yuri says he doesn't feel like it. However, Yuri's pilot named Sasha informs him that he needs a co-pilot for the aircraft. How convenient. Jackson says that Gordon can be the co-pilot, but Gordon again says that he is not capable of performing the function. Seriously, the movie is trying to turn this guy into a complete idiot just for when he dies, and Jackson returns with his wife. The people don't get upset. The group runs to the plane while the airport control tower warns them not to take off. After all, it is evident that it is much safer to stay there. Plane advances, but the runway collapses. My gods, they are going to die, but wait, the protagonist is on the flight, so the laws of physics don't apply, and that's fine. Meanwhile, in Washington there are people on the street breathing in the volcanic ash, and not even the paramedics are wearing masks. Apparently they have already surrendered to death. Already in the Vatican, a crack forms in the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, and she is careful to pass between the fingers of God and Adam so as not to cut them. What a thoughtful crack. And the dome of the chapel drops to the ground and rolls away like a rolling pin. Why not? Back at the mains, Sasha warns them that they are running low on fuel and will have to make an emergency landing in the ocean. But then Sasha discovers that the Earth's crust has moved and brought them closer to their destination. How convenient. The plane's engines start to fail, and immediately Sasha has an idea of how they can save themselves. Apparently this is not the first time this guy has been through this. They run to a car that has airbags on all sides. The plane's hatches are opened and the group jumps out as Sasha plummets with the plane. But the group is also screwed, because how are they going to escape these icy mountains? But they only take Yuri and her children. Even the guy's girlfriend is left behind. Apparently the fairy's spell ended up messing with the wrong character. Meanwhile, Adrian and the others start arriving at the chests. Back in Jackson, he and his group made it down the mountains without freezing in the process. And just in time a pickup truck is driving down the road. What perfect timing. But it's not a simple convenience. The people in the vehicle have a familiar working in the chests who will let them in secretly. It seems that our little fairy has fixed the mess she made earlier. Meanwhile, Adrian receives a call from Satnam, saying that he is about to be killed by a huge tsunami, as the plane diverting to pick them up has not shown up. Are you crazy? Are you going to tell me that the phone companies are still working? Adrian goes to the command base, as the wave that killed Satnam is heading towards them, and they discover that if the chests are not ready in 28 minutes, everyone will be killed. The chests start to leave, leaving most of the people behind, including Yuri and his children. The protagonist's group, on the other hand, manages to get into the vehicle without having to go through any security. Are you serious? Thousands of people worked in this generation and only one animal knew about this path? Tamara stays behind and sees her dog in the crowd. She gives a whistle and out of nowhere the animal becomes a climber, climbs ropes that no human being has access and reaches the woman before the floodgates close. Monkey Dog is the name of this breed. And before leaving, Tamara finds time to give the finger to Yuri, who sees with his lynx eyes. Meanwhile, Adrian makes a speech to the leaders to open the locks of the arks so the people can enter. And of course they could have just opened up and ended the drama, but no, they've been wasting their time with moralizing until they finally open the floodgates. Back to Jackson's group, part of them had not yet entered the ark, as the film still needs to unite Kate and Jackson, so in the opening of the surprise floodgates Gordon ends up being swallowed by the gears, no one ordered to take the protagonist's wife. The door starts to lower and she is about to crush Jackson, but a rope wraps around the gear saving the protagonist, but what a surprise. People enter and the floodgates are closed again. Outside, Yuri throws his children into the floodgate, but ends up falling to his death, my hero. Meanwhile, the rope that saved Jackson now prevents the ark from closing and they have a few minutes before they are hit by the tsunami. The command base discovers the invaders and Adrian, who suddenly took on the role, now gives orders to the captain of the ark. And instead of sending a specialized team, he's going to help unlock the doors himself. It's crazy, this guy is going to risk everyone's lives just to appear more in the film. The tsunami hits the arks and water begins to flood the vessel, and the doors close separating and locking Jackson's group. Adrian appears with an engineer and asks to speak with Jackson, but instead of going straight to the point he prefers to introduce himself, as any normal person would.
You met a Yellowstone! That's great! Open the goddamn door!
Adrian tells Jackson that he cannot open the doors, because if he could, he would have to call the extra responsible for the hydraulics to fix the problem with the rope and we would lose the chance to see the protagonist risking his life to save everyone. Jackson says goodbye to his son and kisses Kate, who has already gotten over Gordon's death. Meanwhile, Tamara drowns, even though she is in an identical space to the protagonist's family, but we come and go. This woman is a disguised extra, it was even taking a while to kick off her boots. And look how curious, above them are the animal cages. A team could open a hole in these bars to get people out of there and help Jackson remove the rope, but can you imagine the work? Jackson manages to remove the rope that was stuck in the heavy gears, but the question was not strength, it was skill, protagonistic way. Everyone is waiting for Jackson, but the man doesn't come back right away. He holds his breath a little longer to make a little drama and then just when they think he's dead the guy appears, the staff celebrates. And those were the 87 points of everything wrong with 2012, and if you want to know if you would survive, just answer this question: what would you do with €1 billion? If you don't know, it's because you don't have the money to buy a ticket to the Ark. But look on the bright side, at least you wouldn't get devoured by a cannibal when the ship's supplies ran out and everyone went mad. A big hug. Goodbye.